In India, a university where people would study medicine, math, logic, astronomy, and even Buddhism. This was more than a school. It was a symbol of global education, open knowledge, and a world connected by ideas. But then it was destroyed, burned to the ground. Its libraries, set to hold millions of texts, turned to ash. And just like that, the world's first global university disappeared. Nalanda isn't just history. It's proof that learning can unite us. Knowledge knows no borders, whether it's 1,500 years ago or today. This is the oldest university in the world. It was built 1,000 years before Harvard. This place had 10,000 students, 2,000 teachers, coming from China, Korea, Tibet, Persia, even Greece, all living and learning in one giant campus. Welcome to Nalanda.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining the Atman show and have very special guests. They have already come to my show many times. Subhash sir is a Padma Shri awardee and Sangita Iyer is a filmmaker. So what I'll do is I'll just briefly talk about the topic that we are going to, cover today. So we are going to talk about the ancient universities of India and where they are currently located. So Nalanda is near Nalanda town, close to Rajgir in Nalanda district, Bihar, India. Takshashila is located in Taxila in Rawalpindi. Vikramashila is currently located in Antichak village area near Khala Gaon, Bihar, India. Odantapuri, current location is Bihar Sharif town. Jagadala Mahavira near Jagdal, present day Bangladesh. Vallabhai University around Vallabhipur in Gujarat. Pushpagiri Vihara, current location is Lalitgiri, Ratnagiri, Odisha. Somapura Mahavira, current location is Bangladesh. Sharda Peeth near Jammu and Kashmir. Mithila in Bihar, and so on and so forth.
सबसे पहले तक्षशिला, जहां चाणक्य और चरक जैसे विद्वान पढ़े। यहां 68 से ज्यादा विषय पढ़ाए जाते थे, राजनीति से लेकर शल्य चिकित्सा तक।
फिर आई नालंदा, ज्ञान का विशाल सागर, 10,000 से ज्यादा छात्र, 1,500 आचार्य।
विक्रमशिला में तंत्र साधना और दर्शन की गूंज थी, और यहीं से अतीश दीपंकर ने बौद्ध धर्म तिब्बत तक पहुंचाया। गुजरात का वल्भी विश्वविद्यालय, जहां प्रशासन और अर्थशास्त्र की पढ़ाई दुनिया भर से लोग करने आते थे। और मत भूलिए ओदंतपुरी, जिसमें 12,000 छात्र शिक्षा ले रहे थे, एक और महान बौद्ध शिक्षा केंद्र। ये विश्वविद्यालय सिर्फ इमारतें नहीं थे, बल्कि भारत की ज्ञान परंपरा की जीवित मिसाल थे। सच में भारत कभी विश्व गुरु था। दोस्तों, मैं आपको ले चलता हूं उस दौर में।
So my question to you is looks like Bihar was a thriving state back in ancient India, but then when you see the current situation, it's like quite a deterioration, and the literacy rate is down. What actually brought the downfall of Bihar? So any one of you can begin with this question, and then we can start with the regular question answer session.
Well,
Subhash, sir, I'll let you go.
Okay, if we look at the modern historical period, it goes back to the Mauryas, etc., and they were concentrated in Bihar. That's the capital was in Pataliputra. So, in fact, even the latest editors of the Vedic texts were in the east. So, east was the center. It was originally northwest. If you go back to the earliest layers of the Rig Veda and Mahabharata, as you know, the war took place in Kurukshetra. But at the same time, you also have Ayodhya of the Ramayana, which is supposedly within the tradition earlier than the Mahabharata. That was in the east. So they were all developed, and sometimes the focus would be in the east, which is Bihar, or later on, about 1,000 years ago in Bengal, or sometimes the West. And so the great universities were in all these directions. The two greatest, Nalanda and Takshashila. Takshashila was in the West and Nalanda was in the East. And there were, we should not forget, similar great centers in the South, all over South. And in fact, I've seen a recent map which lists many, many universities scattered all across the country.
Thank you, sir. Sangita, go ahead.
No, I have nothing more to add. Sir covered everything already. And when you talk about the downfall or the change or the shift, I mean, I think it also depends on what you define as intellectual, right? So yes, of course, overall there has been a downfall in terms of education, and that if you go back in the history, and we have tried to cover that actually in our film Moolam, which is going to release soon, very soon. And from the one being the invasion by the Islamic invasion, which was like the physical destruction, and then uh, the British era, where it was, I think, destruction at a more emotional, mental level.
भागो, बख्तियार खिलजी ने आग लगा दी, नालंदा जल रही है, हमारा ज्ञान जल रहा है। यहाँ 90 लाख पांडुलिपियां थी, विज्ञान, गणित और आयुर्वेद का ऐसा खजाना जो आज की दुनिया की कल्पना से भी परे था, पर ये सब 1193 ईस्वी में बख्तियार खिलजी ने जला दिया।
So all that has happened, but if you even see current states, say let's say the example of India that you gave, 100% literacy rate, what does that really mean? I always look at literacy rate versus the behavior of the people and society overall. Does it match? So I don't know, in that sense. 100% literacy rate while states are behaving not very educated. And so I think the definition of education has changed in itself. What it was back then and back today, the whole definition of education has changed overall.
Thank you. Ancient universities, how did the admission process work at these universities? And why are accounts of gatekeeper scholars and rigorous entrance tests so important for understanding their academic culture? So basically, like there was some regressive process to get into these universities back then. So what do you have to say on that?
Century, 9th century, 10th century, the greatest minds of Asia came to Nalanda to study. It was a vast university, walled city university. But one of the interesting things about it is it had gates at the cardinal points, and they put their best debaters, their greatest minds in each of those gates. And you had to win a debate with one of those debaters, those great minds, to be allowed admission into Nalanda.
Okay. So from what research I have done in the last 2-3 years, again for my film Moolam, because it highlights exactly this topic, I think it was very competitive, highly competitive, because they wanted to ensure serious, capable students being admitted. So Nalanda, from what I read, it required students to undergo oral and written examinations. There were debates, there were interviews with senior scholars and what you call gatekeepers, because they had to do that before they could get in, and a very small percentage of the students passed. So that was more specific to Nalanda. In Takshila, I think they didn't follow a very centralized admission system. So students chose their teachers, and the acceptance was depending on the teacher's discretion and the students' aptitude and discipline. And then Vikramshila, it primarily trained very advanced dharmic scholars who demonstrated intellectual promise. They had this sense of moral discipline and dedication to what you say, a monastic lifestyle. So I think each university cultivated elite scholars through very stringent selection procedures.
Sir, what's your take on that?
Absolutely. Clearly, since India was extremely wealthy, and there are estimates that until about 1,000 years ago, India's share of the world economy was probably close to 45%. So it was extremely wealthy. People wanted to visit it. They wanted to be a part of the learning process. So clearly, there had to be gatekeepers. And even now, if you look at Western universities, admission is done in a variety of ways. It could also be done by word of mouth. A professor hears about some very smart student, or a high school teacher tells his compatriot in the. You have all these channels at work, and they must have been at work back in India as well. Now, let's not forget that for about 1200 years, from 100 CE to about 1300 CE, stuff going on in Java, South Asia, and ships with scholars and traders and so on. And let's not forget also the West, because people have been talking about the Silk Road connecting China and Europe in ancient times. But what they have discovered is that Roman coins are not to be found in China. They're found in South India in great hoards. So, really, most of that interaction was through India, especially South India, from Rome through Arabia and so on to India, South India, and then on to Indonesia and up. And in fact, one of the two great travelers, I think it was Fayan, he went back through the south. He came from China to study, but then he returned back to China by ship. So trade by ship was also very big. So all of this, India was the center. It was extremely wealthy, not only in technology. Technology, I mentioned, for example, Raja Bhoj Paramar was even imagining elevators and flying objects or flying planes, which he mentions in his book that I've written about in my own book called Eternal Bharat. All of this stuff going on. It was the focus. That's why uh, cultures or regions that were not as wealthy, they wanted to attack India for the wealth. And in India, of course, it had a very sophisticated system of weeding out people who were not prepared. So you had to prepare yourself to enter the universities.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I've read that book of yours, Subhash sir. And during my research for the film too, your book was one of the books that I researched. I started with Sahana ji's book, and that was kind of it just started. And then so many references, and it's just eye-opening every time I read. That we didn't know growing up about so much about and then I think it surprised me, it surprised many people when we tell them who don't know, is ancient education, Indian education system is, the impression people have is informal, loosely structured, but actually they were more functional places, very elite research driven universities. Like, for example, Nalanda, I think it was documented by the Chinese scholars, Zhongzong, and one more Chinese scholar, I think Li Ying or something like that. I forget his name.
Even
The whole
Sang.
gate.
Hmm.
Yes, the gatekeeper concept that you talked about, like the gatekeeper scholars, or what they're called, the Dwara Pandita. And at the entrance, these senior scholars, literally, they were pandits at the gate. They tested the students through debate on philosophy, logic, even the interpretation of sutras, and how can they counter argue? Are they able to? How? What is their ability? And then, if you could hold your ground intellectually, only then were you allowed in. And Zhong Zhang has mentioned in his writings that only about 20 or 30% of the applications succeeded. So, if you think about it, like, it was so organized.
Yeah. I want.
नालंदा दुनिया का पहला आवासीय विश्वविद्यालय। यहाँ हजारों विद्यार्थी और गुरु साथ रहते और पढ़ते थे। इसकी शुरुआत 5वीं सदी में गुप्त सम्राट कुमार गुप्त ने करवाई थी और तभी से यह ज्ञान का केंद्र बना। ये हॉस्टल थे जहां 10,000 से भी ज्यादा विद्यार्थी रहते और पढ़ाई करते थे। यहां 1,000 से ज्यादा गुरु पढ़ाते थे जिन्हें उस समय के सबसे विद्वान माना जाता था। यहां खगोल विद्या सिखाई जाती थी। सितारों और समय की गिनती के लिए ऐसे साधन इस्तेमाल होते थे। यहां सिर्फ धर्म ही नहीं, गणित, खगोल, चिकित्सा और भाषा भी पढ़ाई जाती थी। यहीं पर आर्यभट्ट और शीलभद्र जैसे विद्वान बैठते थे। नालंदा ने सचमुच दुनिया को अनगिनत ज्ञान दिया। नालंदा सिर्फ पढ़ाई का स्थान नहीं था, यह एक जीवंत नगर जैसा था जहां हर कोने में कुछ नया सीखने को मिलता था। यहां आयुर्वेद और चिकित्सा की शिक्षा मिलती थी। इन जड़ी बूटियों से दवाइयां बनाई जाती थी। 12वीं सदी में बख्तियार खिलजी ने यहां हमला किया। पुस्तकालय जलता रहा और अनगिनत ग्रंथ हमेशा के लिए खो गए। ये है नालंदा।
Also
Yeah.
add, yeah,
Go
let me
ahead.
also add that recently it's come to light that until the end of the 19th century, education in England, for example, was very haphazard. Only the rich people could afford to educate their children. And then finally, when these English people came to India, they saw that there was sort of mass education where all communities participated, and it was called the Madras system. Then this Madras system was taken back to Europe. So what is assumed by us that this is all Western style of mass education was actually taken from Madras, from South India,
Yes.
and must have been current all over India, but they saw it in South India. Then they said, well, we must also educate not only the children of the rich and the aristocrats, but everybody.
Mm.
So we should not forget it. And let me also add, uh, modern age, scientific age is supposed to have begun with Newton's three laws of motion.
Mhm.
And these three laws of motion were already there 500 BCE in Kanada's sutras. And in fact, I had written on it, I had translated Vaisheshika Sutra many, many years ago. And I had assumed that maybe Newton's second law was superior to Kanada's second law. The second law, which we had assumed when we were in high school, was F equal to ma, force is equal to mass into acceleration. But then a couple of months ago, I went back to Principia, Newton's own book, which was written in Latin and also translated into English. He nowhere says F equal to ma. That was later on, 50, 60 years after him, by Leonard Euler. So, if you really look at this, Kanada's sutras and Newton's sutras or Newton's laws are identical, which is I think is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Mind-boggling.
We did that episode, and I know Karya Virodhi Karman.
Yeah.
To each and
Absolute.
every action, there is
Yes.
equal and opposite reaction.
But I didn't know when we did that episode, when
Yeah.
yeah, but when we did that episode, I wasn't aware that Newton did not have F equal to ma in his laws. At
Mm-hmm.
that time, I wasn't aware. I
Wow.
became aware of it only recently.
Yeah, yeah. You should watch that episode, Sangita. We did that.
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
I made a
So,
mental note while you were
yeah,
talking. Yes, I
yeah.
will
I
surely.
did not know, like, I came to know. I mean, when he was talking, so I just memorized it.
It's unbelievable. Like I said, in the last 2 3 years that I've discovered, and a lot of the things that Subhash just talked about the Madras School of Education, all I didn't know. It's in one of the speakers has actually highlighted that, and
Mhm.
you mentioned earlier about. In Indian education system, like because they came for the wealth, but our wealth was not just the financial. Of course, they did it, but the
Yeah.
wealth of education that
Education.
they were, yeah, no one else had that,
Yeah,
which they did. So it's
yeah.
unbelievable.
Even now, there are more people who use internet information sources and newspapers in India than in the West. In the US, the functional illiteracy rate is 25%. 25%
Mm,
of the people in the US can only sign their name, etc. They can't read a paragraph and make sense of it. And most astonishingly, UCSD, University of California, San Diego, which is one of America's best universities,
yeah.
they had a math remedial class for their incoming students. And they discovered that 25% of the students could not solve the problem. 7 plus 2 is equal to 6 plus what?
Wow.
25% of the students could not find out what should be added to 6 to
Hmm.
make it equal to 7 plus 2.
Wow.
So there are, one glosses over it. And in India, through a variety of ways, through temple pathshalas, which were demolished, of course, during the
Yes.
British time, demolished not physically, but that whole system was destroyed.
Yes.
There was much broader education, um, which so in other words, in addition to these universities and these big monasteries, which of course focused on religious education
Mm.
or religious debate, philosophical debate, there was a whole system of other related institutions spread all across the country, which covered most of the population.
Absolutely.
Moving on to our next question. What kind of subjects did students study at Nalanda, Taxashila, and Vikramashila? And how does this multidisciplinary curriculum compare with the modern university today? So right now we have like science and arts and a med school and law school. So they were, but here people studied everything, you know? Is it, is my view, are my views correct?
5वीं शताब्दी में गुप्त सम्राट कुमारगुप्त ने स्थापित किया दुनिया का पहला आवासीय विश्वविद्यालय, जहां से ज्ञान गया दूर देशों तक। नालंदा में केवल धर्म ही नहीं पढ़ाया जाता था, यहाँ चिकित्सा विद्या, तर्कशास्त्र, गणित, ज्योतिष, ज्योतिर्विज्ञान के साथ साथ भाषाएं और व्याकरण भी सिखाए जाते थे। हालांकि ये मगध में था, विद्यार्थी दूर दूर से आते थे। कोरिया, चीन, जापान और कई अन्य देशों से भी लोग यहाँ शिक्षा लेने आते थे।
Yeah, I think it was very multidisciplinary from what I understand. I mean, of course, multidisciplinary in the modern education system is talked about like it's something new, which happens a lot, I think, with other concepts too. They bring it in like it's something brand new, but it always existed. And I think that's the case in ancient Indian education system too. It was very multidisciplinary. So they had philosophy and logic, metaphysics, grammar, medicine, so Ayurveda, mathematics, astronomy, literature, fine arts, all that was taught in Nalanda. And Takshila had the Vedas and the Vedanga, philosophy, grammar, medicine, surgery. And I think Vikramshila was more specialized in Tantric and Vajrayana Buddhism, what they called. So, but they also excelled in grammar and logic and metaphysics and debate, poetry, ritual sciences. So this whole breadth of discipline made them comparable, I would say, even better than world-class universities by modern standards. From what the readings that I have done, that's the conclusion I came to.
Sir, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Sangita ji has said. In addition, let's also not forget that one of the problems with the modern university is the focus on victim narratives, victimhood narratives. Rather than give the students the capacity to look at the world in a dispassionate way. So there's a lot of focus on this emotional, packaging of the past history so that the objective is to convert students into activists, which is really not wisdom. I'm not saying that past history has not been bad. All kinds of things have happened. But I think the focus of education should be to make the student look at things in a dispassionate way. Everybody, the past as well as the present. So I think in that, the modern university has come up short, and a lot of people are aware of that, and so something needs to happen. And of course, so we do know that the modern university, especially in the West, has become frightfully expensive. In America, it's about $100,000 a year. And for what? For education, which is freely available on the internet, right? These are stories. You read history, and these are stories, narratives, and they are freely available. Why should it be so expensive? Because then it doesn't reach everybody.
Very true. Very, very. It's funny, everything that you're saying, and I'm thinking, have you watched the rough cut of my film, Subhash? Because you're highlighting everything that's highlighted in the film. There's going to be no element of surprise. But it's
Wonderful.
so close
Yes,
to
I
my
did.
heart, this
Wonderful.
topic. Yeah, because all that you're
Yes,
saying is like hitting. I'm like, oh my God, yes, someone has highlighted this point, that point. And for me, every film is a learning journey for me too, because for me, I look at my films as a mini PhD of sorts, because the topic are not generic topics. Those are topics I'm passionate about. So then I'm taking a deep dive, because if I'm speaking to people who have knowledge on the topic, I need to have enough to ask them the right questions. And, from a modern education perspective, even as a mother and observing what's going on in schools here, you very rightly said, is this whole ideology, political ideology that's been brought into education. And, interdisciplinary education too, yes, they offer it now, but back in the days, it wasn't optional. It was the foundation. So, you had your science and you had your darshanas, like the philosophical systems, you had your the 64 kalas, right? The Shilpa, Shastra, the Ayurveda, and Ganit, Niti, logic, all that was part of the education system. And that's why it was so integrated and so holistic. And right now, everything is in silos. And what's that doing is it's limiting the creativity of the child. So that cross-disciplinary thinking, and I think that whole return to the IKS model of holistic scholarship would actually benefit our children and our society, because they are the future of tomorrow. And even debates, if you see, the debates, of course, they happen now, but it's not the same. And even for that instance, see debates on media, like some of the Indian channels that I watch, they call it a debate, but I call them migraine inducing sessions. They're shouting over each
Shouting.
other, they're insulting each other, and it's like, I have tried and I just can't watch it beyond 2 minutes. So that is not debate. Debate has to be respectful, right? And there has to be freedom of inquiry, like you said, without any political or ideological interference, which we don't see at all today. And I think even the other aspect that you highlight about it's high tuition fees. Back in the days, it was accessible to everyone. It was not commercialized. It's very commercialized today. So I don't know if that will ever change. But it would be great to see that, because one of the gurukuls that we've highlighted in the film, and I loved the work that they do for the exact same reason, is they don't charge any, like, so they are walking the talk. So they're not just talking about, oh, it's a gurukul and we are taking back IKS knowledge systems, and they're actually practicing what they're preaching, and they actually don't charge any fees. It's very non-commercial. It's beautiful, the work they are doing. I wish all that can come back.
Sangita, one thing I think that here, like up until like your high school, at least in the public school is free, right? But then in India, even they're charging so much fees for just school, and the undergrad becomes expensive. But other than that, at least everybody is like high school educated. Like that's what I've seen at the minimum. Yeah.
You're right. Public school education is free, which is great. However, I see, because my children are like about 12 years apart, and I've seen a big switch in the public school education system. One, at least for Canada, I can speak, is that it was really good across the board. Public school education in Canada, and most parents didn't feel the need to. I think in the US, it was more favored toward private schooling. But Canada, we didn't feel the need of, because public education system was so good. I'm seeing a huge shift in the last 12, 15 years, like between the two kids. And to what Subhash just mentioned, like all that ideology and mindset has crept into the schools. Like they're trying to get them at that young age where they're so impressionable, right? So yes, it's free, but at what cost is it coming now? And unfortunately, not many parents are aware of it. Yeah, that's the scary part. Like I think public education has become really scary right now.
Oh,
To
okay.
add to that, when
Mm-hmm.
we were growing up in India, education was totally free. I didn't
Oh,
pay a
okay.
single rupee right from school to college
To
to
12,
PhD.
really?
It was absolutely free.
I did not
It,
know that. Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
it still is free, but
Mm.
the government schools are not that good. So parents want
Oh.
to send their children to private schools in India. It still is free in government schools. And likewise in the US, just
Oh,
as
Kendriya
Sangita,
Vidyalaya.
what you were saying about
Kendriya
Canada,
Vidyalaya.
hmm?
Kendriya
Kendriya,
Vidyalaya.
वो तो
Yeah,
सेंट्रल स्कूल है ना, केंद्रीय
वो तो
विद्यालय
central
army,
है.
सेंटर.
army, army kids used to go there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but there are other government schools all
Hmm.
across the country which are totally free. And I went through one of them, in fact,
Mm-hmm.
many of them, because my father used to get transferred every 2 years.
Yeah.
I went to schools I went to a school in Leh, Ladakh also for 2 years.
Wow.
So now in the US as well, although primary and middle and high schools are supposed to be free, but this activism, which is pushed victim ideology, is being pushed by in these schools as well. So a lot of parents are scared and
Yeah.
they're sending their children to private schools in the US now, which are horribly expensive.
Yes.
So this is a problem. So it's a kind of a worldwide process, but to the West is not, it's not all that wonderful. Maybe some of the smaller communities it's good, but in the big cities you're not safe and there's crime. You can be bullied, you can be hurt. in American city schools. So there is one reason why parents are sometimes compelled to send their child to a private school.
Yeah, great points. I agree with all that sir said, and public school here, like I said, has changed. In fact, I remember suggesting to my daughter. I actually considered homeschooling, and I gave her that offer. She didn't want to because it's a new concept for her. I think it's more common in the
Yeah.
US, but post COVID, a lot of parents in Canada have taken. And I was actually open to that because I thought what's happening in the public school space is really damaging. And then how do I protect my child from this, you know? But I don't even. But we shifted her school, of course. But it's the whole the mindset of the board, like you said, it's all coming together. The politics, the education is all now huddled up under one umbrella. So how do you separate? The only thing you can do is keep talking to them and keep sharing information with them, and hopefully they make the right choices. But you know they're dealing with so much. Social media is an issue. Peer pressure is an issue. And you know my schooling. Why I studied in Gujarat, and our university was Gaikwad. Baroda is Gaikwad state. So our university was free for all women. And so we had that growing up. Now, unfortunately, India has become very competitive in private school, and you know, there's all these donations. I've heard of parents,
Yeah.
they start booking their kids when they're expecting the baby or the baby is born.
Exactly. And now remember we did this Hindi medium or English medium, there's a movie, and we did that Gurukul session. So people are like giving so much money when the child is just born to just be admitted into an English medium school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
there is another danger,
Mm.
which is this whole you know, screen with images which children have access to. And in fact, if parents don't pay attention, it's much easier to let the child have her or his own phone, and look at those images. It's like a baby, like a babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I was talking to one of the prominent VCs in America who's based out of Austin. And he was saying the new model that they're looking at is you send your child to a school and the child is taught by an AI instructor. So it's all AI, and the child can be paced by itself. And later on, there is Montessori type of play. And so who knows? There are all of these things happening. And in some ways, it's all trying to reach to that state that we had in ancient Indian schools and universities, where you had one-on-one
Mm.
relationship at the Gurukul with your guru and with
Yes.
your other compatriots,
Yes.
Guru Bhais and Guru Bahans, if you will. And so,
Mm.
Yeah.
how do we bring that back? That is going to be the big challenge.
It's the Guru Shishya Parampara.
Mhm.
Um,
That's good.
Nowadays, though, we see the gurus. I mean, guru is a term I don't take lightly, and not everyone is worthy of being called a guru. But
Mm.
back in the days, I speak to so many teachers across the board. I go and observe students. That's why, and you know, there is this general atmosphere of sadness. Students seem agitated and unhappy. The teachers are unhappy too. And I have spoken to so many, and sadly, what happens is that there was this reverence for guru before. Even I still remember my teachers. I look up to them even today. And my dad, I come from a family of teachers. My dad's been retired a long time, but his students, ex-students who are now teachers themselves or in some professions, are parents themselves, they still stay in touch with him. They come to meet him. They celebrate his birthdays. And I'm telling you, not just because there's a bias that he's my father, I call him the modern day guru because I have not seen this kind of reverence for a teacher across the board. Like, I don't often see that. And I was like, why has that changed? And mind you, a lot of the teachers back in the days, there was a passion. Teaching and imparting knowledge, because it's become commercialized on both sides. Students are not respectful of their teachers. They don't look up to their teachers. The teachers who are not there, they're just doing this as a job. Their hands are tied with the way school boards operate, so they are unhappy. It's just overall atmosphere of sadness, and I always wonder how can learning happen in that kind of a toxic atmosphere.
Right, let's move on to the next question. What are the main historical accounts of the destruction of Nalanda and Vikramshila, and how do historians explain the impact of invasion by commanders like Bhaktiyar Khilji on Buddhist education in India? So I've heard that story, So Bhaktiyar Khilji, I think he fell sick, and then Ayurvedic doctor, he goes to actually cure him, and he puts some medication in his Quran and ask him to read Quran because he was reading Quran, and then he gets better. So he gets jealous that his Hakims are not that capable like the Ayurvedic teachers from doctors from Nalanda. So he went and attacked us. So what do you think about that story, and any comments on that?
आते थे कोरिया चीन जापान तिब्बत से वेनसांग ने लिखा हजारों भिक्षु खुली चर्चा कठिन प्रवेश और अनुशासन यहाँ पढ़ाया जाता था बौद्ध धर्म आयुर्वेद तर्कशास्त्र गणित खगोल शास्त्र और व्याकरण लाखों ग्रंथों से भरी लाइब्रेरी इसकी आत्मा थी जिसे धर्मगुंज कहा जाता था खिलजी के आक्रमण ने इसे राख में बदल दिया लाइब्रेरी हफ्तों तक चलती रही शिक्षक मारे गए विद्यार्थी भागे ये सिर्फ एक भवन नहीं एक सभ्यता का अंत था इस घटना ने भारत में बौद्ध धर्म के पतन को तेज कर दिया आज नालंदा एक यूनेस्को विश्व धरोहर स्थल है और पास ही 2014 में स्थापित हुआ नया नालंदा विश्वविद्यालय है
Learning at the temple level existed, that persisted, but the high level stuff was still done. The great Kerala school of mathematics and astronomy, which lasted till the 16th century. So, but that was just a family, and people, they were able to keep it alive and do new research. So there was a break, which is clear. I think that's all that we can focus on, and rather not go into the specific narrative stories, because who knows? We don't know what happened in the past.
Yeah.
We don't even know what happened in recent past. There are often conflicting accounts based on whether you're a conservative or a liberal. They'll say, no, this is what happened, this is what happened. We don't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have not heard of that story, to be honest. Like, I have not heard of that
I can
story, but
forward you. I can forward you some narratives.
interesting.
I don't know
Well,
how
the
to.
only, honestly,
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
research, the only historical account of the destruction that I came across by reading Sanaji's book was Minaj al-Siraj's description of destruction of both Nalanda and Vikramshila. I think he was a 13th century Persian historian, and he talked about how Bakhtiyar Khilji physically destroyed the buildings. He had the libraries were on fire. There were thousands and thousands of manuscripts that were on fire, and he apparently, I don't know, this is what I read, is a lot of the scholars, the pandits, the Brahmins, the Buddhist monks, they were actually they were killed in the process too. So that is the one reference I have come across in terms of the destruction. But yeah, it was a physical destruction. All the temple university, the temples were also centers of education. They were destroyed. These buildings were physically destroyed, and because a lot of our education was oral translation, right? I heard that the library. This is again to Sanaji's book. Is the library was burning for days and days and days. So can you imagine the amount of knowledge that?
Yeah, 9 million books, and 3 months it was burning.
My
So
God, just
that was
imagine.
But
like,
what
yeah.
is amazing is
Mhm.
that of all the ancient traditions, only one has survived, where all, people are still connected to their old books. Now, you might say, well, the Chinese tradition has also survived. No, China has connected itself to modernity in a let's say in a superficial way. They want to produce things and do it as well, which is wonderful. We praise them for it, but they're not into the same kind of deep questions which their ancestors 2,500 years ago asked. Well, Indians are, and we are connected still, and this connection is now getting expressed all across the world, because these are fundamental questions which affect every human being. For example, who am I? What is consciousness? This and that. And why? How was it done? I think the main vehicle for this were the 64 colors that girls and women and everybody else was encouraged to get into. It's through colors, through indirect learning, because each color expresses intuitions about the deepest meaning of reality and life, in a unique way. And it's easier to teach stuff indirectly rather than directly. And in fact, there was a famous um, duo of Kashmiri philosophers called Anandavardhan and Abhinav Gupta. They speak it as dhvani. Dhvani is the resonance. So you teach about deep stuff through dhvani. You don't teach it through words, because if you teach it through words, the student will say, what nonsense is this? The student won't understand it. You have to slowly steer the student into that space where they get it. And I think that's what we had, and that's what we have to recreate. Why? Because in the age of AI, people are going to be so dislocated psychologically. And as
Yes.
Sangeeta, as you said, they're going to be so sad because they don't know, they are just a machine. So I think this is really one of the big imperatives of our time.
Yes, I mean the mental health. It's I call it a pandemic. It's globally, it's a mental health pandemic that we are dealing with, and it's not getting any better. And why is it not getting better? It's not going to get better. And the colors that you talked about, the 64 colors and all. This is what I went and stayed 2 3 days in that Gurukul, and they're practicing this. I actually felt cheated of an education system. I felt when I stayed with them, I felt like what have I missed out on? What have my children missed out on? They were so happy because you can in front of the camera for half an hour you can tell the kids to pretend, but when you stay there for 2 3 days, I just did followed stayed with them, ate with them. I just cameras were not on at all times. They were just happy, the parents were happy. It was a sense of community and extended family, and it was just so warm. And I thought, my God, what have we missed out on? We've missed out on this beautiful system of learning. The stress that the students are under, they're committing suicides for marks. This, competition is good, but a healthy level of competition is good. And so again, the focus of the film is on that, is the focus is on the mental health issues that we're dealing with today. And can in ancient Indian knowledge systems be the answer, which I think it is. But I just hope the West, unfortunately, people take a lot of our ideas, and they don't give due credit. Knowledge is for sharing and learning, but it'd be nice to see, they rephrase it, they package it with a bow, and then gift it back to the
Yeah.
world, which is what is not right.
Right.
Okay. How did the daily life of student or monk at Nalanda or Vikramshila looked, covering discipline, residential life, debates, and interaction with teachers? Means that was a residential school, and people from all across, like China, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, they all came to study there.
Sangeeta?
Yeah, they were, but I think they were a little different too. I could be wrong. So some were fully residential, if I'm not wrong, and some weren't. That's what my understanding has been.
Okay.
And because you see the even the admission process, right? So Nalanda, that whole gatekeeper aspect was there. Takshila was more of that teacher-led, the guru shishya, the parampara lineage. And then Vikramshila, I think that was something established by the Pala dynasty, because it became this foremost center of advanced tantric and scholastic studies. So again, it was different. So I feel like the lifestyle, though it was all very integrated and very detailed, there was a space for debate, like vada, reasoning, and critical thought. So it was not just a test. it was the heart of the scholarship. You needed like to demonstrate sharp reasoning, clarity of thought. You need to be calm under pressure. Like if you see all these concepts now, if we could use this today, there would be no such mental health issues that we are dealing with. You know, and then students, because of the quality, it was not just spiritual appeal, because then students from all across the world wouldn't be coming there, because standards of teaching were high, the teaching was excellent, the intellectual culture was very, very vibrant, right? And I know that you know, people talk about uh, the whole caste-based system in India, but initially it was education was based on merit. So again, I think it just become a full circle, because we see now, and in the US too, a few years ago, it was all merit-based. In the West too, and now that we see that merit has been replaced, and this whole aspect of wokeism has come in, because that takes over merit, you see how it impacts society at large. So knowledge, it was not by birth at that time. I mean, it changed over time, but originally, so this whole broader Indic ethos was always there. No, what's the Sanskrit saying? And maybe Subhash, it means knowledge is open to all who seek it and earn it. Vidya dadati vinayam. Is that correct?
Right, right. Vidya Dadati Vinayam. Let me
Yeah.
also add, in my view, what the daily life there was must have focused on excellence.
Mm.
Ultimately, um, um, Krishna says, Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. Education is yoga also. And what is yoga? Yoga is excellence in education, in action. And education is also the action of learning. So, in my view, what has been central, and I mentioned this briefly, was women and girls being taught singing, dancing, and the other arts. Women were really the ones who safeguarded this devotion to excellence. I remember when I was a young kid in Srinagar, I would walk around and I would see these girls practicing their singing in these houses. And I think that's where there was a great break. The great break that occurred with the Sultanate was that you could not do singing. You know, you couldn't do music. Certainly that happened in Kashmir. Kashmir was a great center of music and dance, because some of the Sanskrit texts, which are still current all over India, were written in Sanskrit, were written in Kashmir, including the music. You know, like Sangita Ratnakar of Shah and Dev. He was a Kashmirian.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the court of Devagiri. So what happened was that you could not do music, you could not do dance. So these things retreated back into the home, and it could not really be sustained. And I think that hurt, because how do you teach? How does the mother teach excellence to the child? By having gone through that process herself. If she hasn't gone through that process herself, she doesn't know how excellence is that important. And I think that was the big break. And that's a break that is occurring also in modern times, with this focus only on rote learning or doing mechanical stuff, information, rather than devotion to excellence. And I think that's going to be the big challenge, and that's where something needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, mother was called the first guru. They
Absolutely.
used to say that, right? Mother is the first guru. And so the mother, this whole again ties into this whole fancy modern term they call women empowerment. And I don't personally like that term, because I feel women were already empowered. Make it sound like the system was, dual, that women were not. And it wasn't. Like women, it was their choice. If they wanted to learn, learning centers were open for everyone. And even like the lifestyle there, especially I think Nalanda and Vikramashila were more like the residential schools, from my understanding, and it was very disciplined. There was like meditation, there was space to live, academics was very intense, this whole public debate and rigorous intellectual training. Again, there was this mentorship with your teachers, and it was a like an extended family atmosphere. So there's this aspect of spirituality, scholarship, community, this whole aspect of coexistence, which I feel is missing today. And that reflected that balance in their day to day.
Yeah. Heard, I don't know how much it is true, but it's something you can understand that Nalanda and Takshashila were like a Ivy League, and people who did not even get in that Ivy League, there were some little universities around that area that people could still study. Not sure
Yes.
if this is correct or not.
I
Oh no,
like satellite campuses.
oh,
Yeah.
and no, and they were. I think education was decentralized. They were gurus. You didn't have to go to these universities. Also, they
Yes.
were individuals. They sought these gurus out,
Mhm.
and that's why we have uh, some of the great Sanskrit Shastric texts were written by individuals who are not part of any university. So, and one forgets education is a lifelong process.
Yes.
The school or the university only gives you the initial tools so that you can learn on your own ultimately. And I think
Mhm.
that's what it should be. After all, how many years you go to school? College, you go for 4 years, but people live for 40, 50, 60 years after that. So this 4 years, all the wisdom could not have been packed into your head in those 4 years. And not only that, education experts have said the whole system where you go from one class to another. You have 5 or 6 hours during the day. You go
Mhm.
to one class, you're given a story on one subject. And then you
Yeah.
go to another classroom, you're given a story on another subject. You've already forgotten what you were given in the first one, the third one, the fourth one. This does not actually lead to proper retention and understanding of any of those subjects. And that's why, in some ways, people are getting alienated from everything. Back to sadness. This
Yes.
is the source. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. Takshashila is often described as more urban and open compared to the monastic campuses of Nalanda and Vikramshila. How did that change the kind of student it attracted and the careers and they pursued? Like, why is Takshashila more important, like more modern, like than any other? So that is right now in Pakistan. I know this. I understand that there's nothing there, but yeah, it
I
was there
think
back. Yeah.
maybe Subhash sir can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was one of the oldest universities, Takshila, and it
Okay.
was not a residential uh, setting, right? So unlike Nalanda and Vikramshila, which were very residential Mahaviharas that they called them,
Mm.
Takshila I think grew. It grew organically as an urban learning hub, and it was
Mm.
situated along major trade and cultural routes. So what that
Mm.
did is there was no, sir said earlier, no single centralized campus. There was
Mhm.
no monastic gatekeeping. Students lived in either the cities, in the gurukulas, or with their teachers, and scholars operated like independent, like acharyas. So that
Mhm.
whole urban life is basically accessibility plus diversity. And what it did is students from from merchant, administrative, royal, military families, because of this location, and network, it attracted princes and diplomats and military trainees, administrators, healers, artisans also, because artisanship was also a big part of our society. So I think it was more socially and professionally diverse than the very specific monastic residential Nalanda and uh, Vikramshila, is what my understanding is.
Yeah. Sir, what's your take on that?
I totally agree with that.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So, what lessons can modern higher education, especially in India, learn from the rise and fall of these ancient universities in terms of interdisciplinary, academic freedom, funding, protection during times of conflict? Now, we still have good universities like IIT and all, like, still very valuable in the West. So how can we protect it so that, it doesn't get destroyed in future by, some person, like somebody from the West or somewhere, so how do you think we can protect during these times of conflict? And I feel there should be an international law. Even if you have a war, you cannot touch the universities and the temples and things. You can do what you can take the finances, but don't destroy these structures, What is your take on that?
Well, that's probably not going to happen, a war, etc. It's a global village.
Yeah.
So I think the greater danger is uh, financial solvency of these universities because they become too expensive. And then the other big process is the population collapse. The population in many parts of the world is started uh, reducing or falling very, very rapidly. For example, in South Korea, fertility rate is only 0.7. So in 2 generations, there'll be 1/10. The young people, they'll be 1/10 of what they are right now. So all these big physical structures will not have students going through them. And so that is the big challenge right now. Will the universities remain solvent in face of rapid population collapse? That's one. Second, as they have become very expensive, maybe, and then there are not jobs for each of these majors at the end of the 4 years, right? Like in the US, you do a program in anthropology or history of art, you spend $400,000, and there are no jobs. There are maybe only 10 jobs in the entire country and 2,000 graduates, right? So people will stop entering these programs. So these programs will collapse. So what will that happen? Again, that's another stress point as far as the financial solvency of the university is concerned. These are the challenges. I don't think we should worry about war and physical destruction.
Yeah.
Also, like one more thing that with a coming of AI and stuff, people could be educated while sitting in the house or like virtually or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, but with AI, one has to be like
Absolutely.
what's being fed into AI. Like I
Yeah.
feel like those who are sitting up there and controlling AI, they are
Yeah.
controlling all aspects of society. So
Yeah.
one has to be mindful. Like if I don't have enough knowledge about, say, my own, say, if I'm doing this research and I
Mm.
plug it into AI, I cannot. I personally believe that I will not blindly believe what AI is putting out. I want to check those references because it's biased too.
Mhm.
Is to what's been fed inside, and especially when it comes to anything that's to do with Indian Hinduism, those kind of things. You have to be very mindful. That's why I am still very old school. I love reading. I will read all books, all authors, and whether I agree with them or disagree, but that's the right way to know. And academic freedom, like I said, I think we touched on that point earlier. Subhash also mentioned this whole ideology creeping into education. That I hope it changes. I don't know if it will. And to your point earlier, what we can do now is digitally preserve everything. So now we have that option, which was not available back in the days. Like
Exactly.
start preserving everything digitally, and that's like your this disaster and conflict preparedness, like you said. So you have an archival system. You should have research protection protocols because otherwise a lot of our knowledge and content is taken and plagiarized. So that whole civilizational asset, it must be treated as that knowledge. And I really feel that Guru Shishya Parampara, that needs to come back. Again, we have highlighted that in the film because I think the depth matters. That whole mentorship matters. Every child is not the same. We just Sir mentioned that briefly too, about like we have all these students going in and they're pumping out graduates, postgraduates, but there are no jobs. Are they aligned? There's so much pressure these students are feeling, and even mental health, for me, that's a big thing. This whole ethical, spiritual, and emotional well-being. And these are fancy terms they use now. I didn't know myself. I studied psychology, and I thought, wow, this is amazing emotional quotient, EQ, and spiritual quotient. Not knowing that this always existed in our system as the Panchakosha model. So, I feel that. Mental health is directly connected all the things that we are dealing with. So that crisis today, if you think about it, because it was so holistic and well-rounded, this whole emotional well-being and spiritual well-being was just the way of life. The sense of community, being connected to everyone, humans, nature, animals, we automatically became resilient, and we had that emotional maturity. But now we still have yoga that they're introducing, and mindfulness that they've started calling it that. But now it's under pressure. I feel it's because there's this mental health crisis, and people are just bringing that in. But that's not the right way. That should be part of the career, especially in India. What is your reason not to teach? I would have loved to learn yoga growing up and do pranayam. I didn't learn that till my mom learned it, and so I learned it from her. Why is it that not mandatory in every school? Because it is directly connected to your mental and emotional well-being.
How about you?
Let me also just add, as Sangeeta said, a lot of sources on the internet are not to be trusted, or they're not fair, they are biased. There's a new source which is much fairer and less biased, more believable than Wikipedia, and it's called Grokipedia.
Rocky.
Groki, Grokipedia. Do check it out. It's
Okay.
pretty good. And this is ultimately going to be renamed Encyclopedia Galactica. This is Elon Musk's
Okay.
education project, because Elon Musk himself, he has been complaining about how Wikipedia has been taken over by either neo-colonialists or by far left groups, far left
Nice to
activist groups, or the woke people. So we
Yeah.
need something else. So
so nice to
Grokipedia is
know.
much better. Yeah.
So nice to know that Elon Musk has an
Yeah.
unbiased attitude. That's a good thing.
Well, I mean, he has his own biases, but he's
Yeah.
at least trying to, everybody has biases. Let's concede that.
Yeah.
But Wikipedia is too far left.
Uh-huh.
And we need other, or in any event, even if you check out Wikipedia, you want some other sources as well,
Uh-huh.
as many as you can. Now you can go to Grokipedia and look at the same subject, and you'll generally find a fairer representation out there.
Okay, nice to know. I did not
Yeah,
know
I
that.
will
And nice
check it
to,
out
I'll
too.
check it
And
out.
can I add one more point? Is
Sure,
that
sure.
while you were talking, it just came to mind that whole aspect of leadership matters. So it all starts from the top. And if you see back in the ancient times, it's whoever led the university. So I think it's like people like Silabhadra and Dharmapal, king of the Pala dynasty. The universities thrived. So when the leadership is weak or politically pressured, then the decline began at that time too, right? So that's what's happening now. I don't know if that'll happen, it's wishful thinking, but I feel universities today, they need visionary, independent leadership that's chosen just for academic merit, not political loyalty, and that's missing. The saying like, holistic education will create holistic humans. And because our education is not holistic, that's why we're seeing this fractured, the society is fractured as a whole.
Great. Thank you so much for amazing insight on this topic. Do you have anything to say to my viewers of the Atman Show? Anyone can, begin.
I will just say keep watching the
Wonderful.
Atman show. Yes, thank you for having us. I just come to this for me, this conversation with when you invite me with Subhash sir is like, just sitting at a coffee table with my cup of chai and just having a conversation. It's
Yeah.
informal. We just
Yeah.
talk, and I don't know how much sense we make. I hope we make sense for the viewers.
Yeah.
But it's just a conversation. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
good to talk about these things. So we
Yeah.
enjoy.
That is why I like informal. Like it's when you do informal, it's the truth comes out. I don't want like scripted. Yeah, yeah. So, do you
In
have any?
Sanskrit, that is called satsang.
Right.
It's thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.